The 2009 Malagasy political crisis began on the 26th of January 2009 with the political opposition movement led by Antananarivo Mayor Andry Rajoelina, which sought to oust President Marc Ravalomanana from the presidency. The crisis reached its climax on the 21st of March 2009 when Andry Rajoelina was declared the president of the High Transitional Authority of Madagascar, 5 days after Ravalomanana transferred his power to a military council and fled to South Africa. The international community immediately condemned the leader and his ascension as unconstitutional. Financial support and foreign investments stopped and the country fell into one of the worst economic crises in its history. The SADC and the African Union have been designated to supervise Madagascar's political reinstatement, though the objective of the transitional government was to run presidential elections as soon as possible to relieve the tensions. Its major challenge has been to establish an agreement among Madagascar's 4 key political factions, some of which were and still are unfriendly to the transitional government. On the 11th of December 2010, a new constitution was formally approved, launching the Fourth Republic. On the 28th of October 2011, a consensus Prime Minister Omar Bariziki was appointed. Presidential and parliamentary elections were scheduled for the 8th of May and the 3rd of July 2013. Origins of the conflict. In December 2007, Andry Rajoelina was elected mayor of Antananarivo. Tensions quickly grew between President Ravalomanana and the young mayor over the course of 2008 as Rajoelina became a vocal critic of a series of unpopular policies enacted by the president. He condemned what he called the restriction of freedom on the island, and criticized the president's plans to lease large parts of land to the Korean industrial company The. On the 13th of December 2008, the Ravalomanana administration decided to shutter Viva TV, a television channel belonging to Rajoelina, after broadcasting an interview with the former exiled president Didier Rei-artur. Other television and radio stations that also aired the interview were not sanctioned. Andry Rajoelina organized a series of rallies in January 2009 that took aim at the Ravalomanana administration and gave voice to growing popular resentment toward the president's increasingly authoritarian policies and a widespread perception that national development had only benefited an elite in minority, of which the president was the most visible figurehead. As anti-government frustration transformed into civil unrest, 2 state television stations were burned by anti-government protesters. At least 130 people were killed in Madagascar during the crisis. The protests were seen as the gravest challenge faced by the Ravalomanana government since he came to office in 2002. President Ravalomanana vowed to restore order, whatever the cost. According to a government statement, protests, Rajoelina called a general strike during the weekend of 24-25 January 2009 in the capital city, Antananarivo, against Ravalomanana, whom he has called a dictator. Ravalomanana, who was in South Africa, cut short his trip to a regional summit in Pretoria and flew back to Madagascar. In a statement, Ravalomanana accused the mayor of attempting a coup, saying, "The call for revolt and civil disobedience corresponds to a coup d'etat, tramples on the values of the Constitution and the Republic's institutions." On the 26th of January 2009, the protests turned increasingly violent. Demonstrators set fire to the Madagascar state-owned radio building, attacked a private television station owned by Ravalomanana, and looted shops and businesses throughout the city. The same day, armed government security agents reportedly disabled the transmitter of Viva Radio, a private radio station owned by Rajoelina. Protesters ransacked two pro-government television stations in Antananarivo. Thousands of protesters raided and looted the headquarters of the Radio Nationale Malgache and Television Nationale Malgache building around 1 p.m. local time on the 26th of January 2009. About an hour later, demonstrators burned down the Malagasy broadcasting system, a private station owned by President Ravalomanana. A policeman and a 14-year-old protester were reportedly killed in the clashes at the Malagasy broadcasting system attacks. Firefighters found the bodies of at least 25 people in the ruins of a burned-out, looted department store in downtown Antananarivo. The bodies were thought to be those of looters who became trapped in the burning shop when the roof caved in. In total, 44 people died. The bodies were taken to a morgue, and all but 10 of them were found to be severely burned. In a show of defiance against the government, Rajoelina called for all Antananarivo residents to stay home on the 29th of January 2009. This ghost town protest basically closed all stores and businesses in the capital city. The Roman Catholic Cardinal Emeritus of Antananarivo, Armand Razafindratandra, appealed for calm as the protests spread outside of the capital. All state and private radio stations in the country reportedly ceased broadcasting, with the exception of Radio Don Bosco, which is run by the Salesian Religious Institute. Rajoelina said on the 31st of January that he was taking control of the country due to the failure of Ravalomanana and the government to fulfill their responsibilities. He said that a request for Ravalomanana's immediate resignation would be submitted to Parliament in order to comply with the legal procedure. Furthermore, he asked that the central bank withhold money from the government, that all government ministries close, and that the security forces join him. Rajoelina said that he wanted the constitution to be respected and that it was Ravalomanana who had violated the constitution. According to Rajoelina, a new transitional government would soon be appointed under his leadership and a new presidential election would be held within 2 years. Speaking on the same day, Ravalomanana stated that he was still the president of this country and that he would do what is necessary to develop this nation. The African Union immediately warned Rajoelina that it would not accept an unconstitutional power grab in Madagascar. It's totally forbidden to take power by non-constitutional means. Opposition leaders allied to Rajoelina filed a petition with the High Constitutional Court on the 2nd of February, asking it to remove Ravalomanana from office. By that point, attendance at Rajoelina's rallies had reportedly decreased. On the 3rd of February, Rajoelina said at a rally that he would announce his new government on the 7th of February. On the same day, the High Constitutional Court ruled that it had no power to remove the president from office, as that power belonged to Parliament. Also on the 3rd of February, Rajoelina was dismissed as mayor and a special delegation, headed by Andry Rajoelina, was appointed instead. Rajoelina denounced the decision, saying that there was no valid reason for it and that he was prepared to face arrest if necessary. He warned that the city would not accept this decision. Rajoelina held another rally on the 4th of February, with about 1,500 people in attendance. On that occasion he described the appointment of Andry Rajoelina as an insult to the people of Madagascar. He instead designated Michelle Ratsavahlake to succeed him as mayor and gave her his mayoral scarf. Shooting at opposition rally. On the 7th of February, an opposition rally was held with 20,000 in attendance. The demonstrators marched towards Ambohitsoro Palace and crossed the Ligne Rouge, the perimeter line around the palace gates that demarcates the zone off-limits to the public. The palace guards responded by firing live ammunition to disperse the crowd. Initial reports counted 83 wounded and 28 people killed, including a local reporter. Some looting was reported afterward. Ambulances took the wounded to hospitals or private clinics, and bodies were seen piled up on the streets before they were taken to the morgue. The National Police warned that the death toll could rise, as many of the wounded were in critical condition. The following day it was reported that the death toll had increased to at least 50, with doctors estimating that 180 people had arrived at the city's main Andry Rajoelina hospital. Antananarivo journalist Fanya Sahola said, "The mortuary is full and the hospital is full." On TV there is a special announcement calling on people who have cars to come and pick up the injured people from the hospitals. This brought the number of people killed since the start of the political violence to 130, with 80 people killed before the shooting of the demonstrators, including the people who died in the burned department store. Also on the 7th of February, Rajoelina said that Rei-artur would be prime minister under his transitional authority. According to Rajoelina, each of Madagascar's regions would have representation in the transitional authority. Regarding Rei-artur Palace, Rajoelina alluded to its history as a mayoral residence prior to 2002 and said that it belongs to the people and to the city, while declaring that he had decided to give the palace to Monu for his use as prime minister. On the same day, Ravalomanana urged calm and order, accusing Rajoelina of cross all limits, while Prime Minister Charles Ravalomanana announced a one-week extension of the curfew. While visiting hospitalized victims of the shooting on the 8th of February, Rajoelina vowed to continue his struggle and argued that Ravalomanana's answer to the popular call for change was gunfire. He called for a national day of mourning on the 9th of February. On the 9th of February, Defense Minister Cécile Manourahantu announced her resignation, saying, "After all that has happened, I decide as of now to no longer remain part of this government." Chief of Military Staff Andry Rajoelina was appointed to replace Manourahantu on the same day. The 7th of February shooting was thought to have reversed the opposition's declining momentum. Newspapers published on the 9th of February strongly denounced the shooting. On the 10th of February, speaking before a rally of about 5,000 supporters, Rajoelina urged the people to observe a general strike on the next day. He asked that everyone stay indoors and that no one go to work or attend school. Rei-artur announced the appointment of 4 ministers to serve in his transitional government, and he said that the remainder of them would be appointed by the end of the week. Meanwhile, both Ravalomanana and Rajoelina accepted dialogue in principle. Rajoelina said that dialogue would be conditional on the holding of a new presidential election of the formation of a transitional government. At a 35,000-strong rally in Antananarivo on the 14th of February, Ravalomanana said that he would serve out his full term as president, that he was listening to the people, and that he regretted the deaths that had occurred during the protests. On the same day, Rajoelina held a rally nearby, with about 10,000 in attendance. At a rally on the 17th of February, Rajoelina vowed to continue the struggle, and later in the day several thousand of his supporters engaged in sit-ins near key ministries representing the government. Defense Minister Antananarivo invited Rei-artur to participate in talks. Rajoelina's supporters took over several important ministries on the 19th of February. changing the locks and installing Rajoelina's own ministers to work in them. Meanwhile, Ravalomanana appointed a new Minister of the Interior, Rei-artur. His predecessor as Interior Minister, Rei-artur, was said to have departed the government due to poor health. Only hours after the opposition took over the government ministries, they were removed from the ministries by security forces early on the 20th of February. About 50 of Rajoelina's supporters were arrested. Ravalomanana and Rajoelina met on the 21st of February. This meeting, which lasted about 45 minutes, was organized by the Council of Christian Churches in Madagascar. Both Ravalomanana and Rajoelina agreed to 5 points intended to calm the situation. This was intended as a prelude to more comprehensive dialogue. On the 23rd of February the two met again for about an hour, and they held a third meeting, also lasting an hour, on the 24th of February. However, Ravalomanana failed to appear for a planned meeting on the 25th of February, and Rajoelina then announced that he was withdrawing from the talks. Rajoelina criticized Ravalomanana for his absence and furthermore stated that the meetings he had held with Ravalomanana prior to that were disappointing. Andry Rajoelina, who had been mediating the talks, abandoned his role shortly before Rajoelina withdrew from the talks. According to Rajoelina, the talks were fruitless and deadlocked. Post-talks, a protest in Antananarivo was broken up by the security forces on the 26th of February. Another protest in Rei-artur on the 27th of February was also broken up. 2 deaths and 13 serious injuries were reported in the latter incident. At a 10,000-strong rally in Antananarivo on the 28th of February, Rajoelina vowed to continue his struggle until we end this dictatorship. He said that, beginning on the 2nd of March, protests would be held in the 13th of May Plaza on a daily basis. He also called for the army to support him. A protest in Rei-artur was broken up by police on the 4th of March, and 2 people were killed. Also on the 4th of March, President Ravalomanana declared his intention to restore order on Radio Mada. In Antananarivo, police blocked roads on the 5th of March to prevent protests in the 13th of May Plaza. The security forces unsuccessfully attempted to arrest Rajoelina at his compound late on the 5th of March. They also raided his Viva media network. Initially they surrounded Viva, and after 30 minutes the staff attempted to evacuate equipment, at which point the security forces stormed the building and confiscated equipment. Rajoelina told Agence France Presse on the 7th of March that he was now hiding in a safe location where I cannot be attacked. It was later acknowledged that he had gone to the residence of the French ambassador on the 6th of March. Mutiny and military leadership changed. Soldiers at a military base in Rei-artur district, near Antananarivo, mutinied on the 8th of March. They objected to the use of force against the opposition. United Nations envoy Tibile Drame said on the 9th of March that the UN was placing Rajoelina under its protection in a diplomatic residence. The French Foreign Ministry said on the 10th of March that Rajoelina had left the French ambassador's residence. On the 10th of March, the Chief of Staff of the Malagasy Army, General Edmond Rassalomahandri, gave political leaders 72 hours to solve the country's problems and return peace, threatening to take over if this did not occur. The same day, Defense Minister Antananarivo announced his resignation shortly after a number of army officers visited his office to threaten a switch of allegiances to Rajoelina. On the 11th of March, pro-opposition soldiers from the CAPSAT stormed the army army headquarters and forced Edmund Rajoelina to resign. Analysts stated that civil war seemed a distinct possibility. Andry Rajoelina replaced Rajoelina, apparently as a result of internal army deliberations and not a presidential appointment, and Andry Rajoelina said that the military would remain neutral and not seize power, thus revoking the 72-hour ultimatum. A spokesman for Rajoelina said on the 11th of March that Rajoelina would not participate in talks planned to begin the next day. Subsequently, the Christian Council of Churches announced that the talks would be delayed. On the 12th of March, the opposition took over the Ministry of Finance and Budget with the support of the armed forces, while the president's prime minister held a 10-minute meeting with the opposition-designated prime minister, who later stated that Ravalomanana had agreed to give up his job to him. The next day, the chief of the military police stated he was taking orders from Andry Rajoelina and not from the general appointed by Ravalomanana. This was followed by the sending of army tanks against the Ivaloha palace of the president, while some 3,000–5,000 civilian supporters of Ravalomanana surrounded the palace to counter opposition protests further away from the area. The Ravalomanana supporters, however, were told to clear the road in case the army neared the area. On the 14th of March, Monya occupied the Prime Minister's office while the opposition forces controlled the building. Monya announced that the opposition forces, called the High Authority of Transition, is presiding over the destiny of Madagascar. Rajoelina gave the president 4 hours, until 6 p.m., to voluntarily resign, after which a mass civilian march would take place on the presidential palace to put Ravalomanana out of office. He explicitly ruled out violent overthrow through military means. However, Ravalomanana later emerged from the guarded palace after the deadline had passed, asserting that he was still the legal president and calling for a national conference. On the 15th of March, Ravalomanana offered to hold a referendum on whether he should stay in power and not, which was seen as a sign of the intense pressure placed on his presidency. The following day, Rajoelina rejected this proposal and called on the security forces to arrest Ravalomanana. Capture of palace and Ravalomanana's resignation. On the 16th of March 2009, one of the palaces of President Ravalomanana, the Rei-artur palace, was stormed and taken by soldiers of the Malagasy army. Reports also indicate the capture of the country's central bank. The president was not in the stormed palaces at the time. The African Union condemned the action, calling it an attempted coup d'état. The actions followed an earlier call from opposition leader Andry Rajoelina for the president's arrest. Rajoelina insisted that the palace seizure was not a coup, although he immediately installed himself in the presidential offices of the captured palace. Hours later, the BBC stated that Ravalomanana was to resign and hand over the powers of both the president and prime minister to a military board headed by Vice Admiral Hippolyte Ramerosin. Ravalomanana later said, "I never resigned. I was forced to hand power over at gunpoint on March the 17th. At the time, Ravalomanana had already moved out of the Ivaloha palace to an undisclosed location. As of the 24th of March, he was reportedly in Swaziland. The military junta, consisting of senior military personnel, would have been charged with organizing elections within 24 months and rewriting the constitution for the Fourth Republic. However, Vice Admiral Ramerosin announced on the 18th of March that it would transfer power directly to Rajoelina, making him president of the opposition-dominated High Transitional Authority that he had appointed weeks earlier. With the military's backing, the authority was charged with taking up the task previously accorded to Ravalomanana's proposed military directorate. Madagascar's constitutional court deemed the transfer of power from Ravalomanana to the military board and then to Rajoelina to be legal. The court's statement did not include any justifications for its decision. Rajoelina said that Ravalomanana should be prosecuted for allegedly using lethal force against unarmed opposition demonstrators earlier in the year. Rajoelina is prohibiting Ravalomanana's ministers from leaving the country. On the 19th of March, Rajoelina suspended both chambers of parliament. Rei-artur responded to international criticism on the 20th of March, saying that the government will explain the real situation. Maybe the way Madagascar acts is not very clear. Things can be a bit specific which may be difficult to follow in every detail. Quote, according to Rei-artur, the transfer of power was not a coup d'etat but instead the direct expression of democracy. When representative democracy does not express itself through the institutions. Rajoelina was sworn in as president on the 21st of March before a crowd of 40,000 supporters. No foreign diplomats were in attendance. Rajoelina's foreign minister said none were invited.